Here's where you're gonna learn what it takes to be a real mafioso.
I think it's safe to say that everyone can divide up their Steam library into two primary categories. The first being games that they play frequently and addictively, and the second being a huge stockpile of games that they bought on various Steam sales and have never touched since. Yes, this is a call-out post, even to myself. Enter Gunpoint. Looking back at it, I'm surprised that I purchased this game in the first place. I'm not sure where the discount came from, but 10% isn't that much off on a game, and I was a pretty frugal teenager at the time, so spending $9 on an indie title I knew only from face value was a relatively bold move for me. Regardless, I made my choice and did what few Steam game owners can claim. I played through the entire game upon purchasing it. I know, hold your applause. It was quick to beat, and after my first completion of it, Gunpoint would lay dormant at the back of my mind for the next 6 years. After having spent some time working on my channel, I realized that using my friend's playlist of chill lo-fi hip-hop beats to study and cry alone to as outro themes didn't really fit my style of being a mafioso. Honestly, my content doesn't really reflect such a narrative either. However, I decided that I should at least attempt some sort of mafia-esque narrative with a signature intro and outro. Fortunately for me, this was no problem, as my mind quickly drew up the solution in the form of Gunpoint's soundtrack. Gunpoint is a relatively unsuspecting game. At face value, the typical Steam shopper might overlook the many merits it has, seeing it as merely another indie stealth title. However, Gunpoint provides an incredibly enjoyable playing experience, mainly through its two core gameplay elements that can be found in use throughout the entire game, the first of these being the game's movement options. The very first mission/pseudo cutscene introduces, in my opinion, the most enjoyable portion of Gunpoint, the Bullfrog Jumpy Pants. These allow you to channel a huge leap, greatly improving your movement options for both espionage and offense. You can choose to work your way around an entire building completely undetected, or tackle every guard in sight. These pants allow for both stealthy and aggressive playstyles, and really take this game to the next level, despite their simplicity. They're a hell of a lot of fun to play with, though it's tough trying to convey the amount of enjoyment I get from tackling a guard off a 3-story building with just words. The second gameplay mechanic is the hacking. By using various devices such as a crosslink and a wire jack, you progress through each level by hacking your way through doors, elevators, and security measurements of all kinds. Normally, hacking in games is boiled down into a boring or trivial minigame in order to open a door and progress, ultimately wasting the player's time. However, Gunpoint's hacking system is both equally seamless and loads of fun to mess around with, making multiple approaches to the same level easy and enjoyable. When you switch into the hacker mode, all hackable entities are clearly colored in their respective tints. Entities that cannot yet be hacked are completely blacked out, letting the player know that they aren't accessible until the corresponding node is hacked. Also, when switching into hacking mode, you'll notice that the music changes alongside the graphics. This is a great additional touch that really further transforms you from typical keyboard junkie to elite hacker man. Both of these central mechanics of fluid movement and freeform hacking make Gunpoint a really enjoyable experience overall. However, it's important to note that the game does have its fair share of jank, being a rather small indie title. As much as I hate to say it, Gunpoint's plot is, in my opinion, its greatest weakness. That's not to say that the story itself isn't enjoyable, rather that it has some obvious flaws going on. The first and most noticeable of these flaws is that the storytelling feels a bit convoluted. There isn't too much to keep track of, but I still found it tough to keep a lead on where the plot was going, on what the motives of each character was, and why I was getting paid so little for such stressful jobs. This level of confusion that I felt was mainly perpetuated by the fact that missions didn't have a terribly linear flow to them. Early on in the game, you can only take jobs from Rook, CEO of Rook Firearms. Once your initial missions with her are completed, however, you start taking jobs from Katie, a wrongly accused employee at Rook's company, Jessler, a CEO of a rival firearms company to Rook, and Mayfield, the chief of police. This triple threat of quest givers don't actually seem to provide much variance within the story, as ultimately, the same climactic ending occurs regardless. This sense of choice feels less freeing and more confusing, as the order of operations of which event occurred first quickly becomes blurred. Maybe the order of operations doesn't actually matter and I'm overthinking this, but then why give the illusion of choice in the first place? To be perfectly honest though, this somewhat confusing storytelling never really hinders the gameplay itself, which is the real focus of most any game regardless. Also, on a more positive note, Gunpoint has plenty of humorous interactions amongst its cast of characters. Some of your dialogue options provide entertaining moments between you and the varying characters throughout the game. However, this too comes with some issues, as some of these options either don't get answered or simply don't prompt the other person to retort in any fashion whatsoever. That being said, I believe that most of the game's humor comes from the silly gameplay that is provided with the bullfrog pants to begin with. I'm not much of a musician myself, but it'd be criminal to not mention this game's soundtrack and composition in a review. As stated at the beginning of the video, this game's soundtrack has stuck in my head ever since I first played it. Every track oozes with jazzy detective noir and/or sneaky hacking antics that help build a sense of style within the game's world. There's a reason why I've used Gunpoint's main track as my quasi-intro/outro for so long now, and I hope to keep doing so for future videos, unless the creators request I don't, of course. I'd seriously recommend giving it a listen, and if you're feeling particularly gracious, you can always buy the soundtrack directly from the creator's website or on Steam. In conclusion, despite my issues with the game's narrative, I really enjoyed playing through Gunpoint again. Its attributes certainly shine a lot brighter than its weak points, and it has an undeniable charm that's easy to love. In totality, this playthrough only took me around an hour and a half, and honestly, I recall having beaten the game in the past in under an hour, so it's a pretty short game to complete. However, it's important to mention that I ran through the game pretty quickly all the times that I played it, not attempting to be all too stealthy, so if you choose a more subtle approach, your playthrough may take longer. Still, Gunpoint is a game whose experience I relish each time I play it, and I'm glad it got its own cosmetic into Team Fortress 2. As for the future of Gunpoint, it sadly seems as though the game was a one-off by the developers. Checking out the website for the game, I managed to find my way to Tom Francis' YouTube channel, who is the lead developer for the game. On the channel, it's clear to see that his time and effort has been spent on a game called Tactical Breach Wizards, which looks like a lot of fun. However, I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't have loved a more story-driven open-world noir game, though that's a pretty tall order all things considered. For what it is, Gunpoint is an impressive game, having only taken 3 years worth of weekends on a developmental end, and the joy it's brought me leaves me in excitement for Tom Francis to release his next project. A case of crossed wires. 16 dead. 36 injured. 20 jobs. $13,000. The week echoed in my mind, like a gunshot in an empty street. They don't let me name names on this blog, but the person behind the hit I was investigating is probably being picked up by the East Point police about now. Killing him wasn't worth the stain on my relatively new coat. The trigger man's dead. That would have felt good if I hadn't just taken a 7-story body slam. I don't know. I guess I picked the least shitty of two incredibly shitty sides. Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe all that matters is that I now have the ability to kick doors down. Either way, I need a drink. Should you play Gunpoint? Yeah, I'd give it a shot.